Welcome back to another episode of Comic Wars. Tonight, we're discussing the battle between Freddy Krueger, the Dream Demon Nightmare on Elm Street, of course, versus Pinhead, the Hell Priest of Clive Barker's creation. Remember, the victor of each match is announced during the outcome at the end of the show. So we're going to have a lot of feats to cover, and believe me, this is actually one of the most amount of feats we're actually ever probably going to have to cover. At least it is currently, and I don't foresee the rest of the season having this many feats, but it is pretty ridiculous how many feats they have. So without further ado, let's get into the overview. And once again, if we had guests, this would be the time where we introduce them and where we would go and ask for their guesses. Little hypothesis, essentially. After that, then we get into the background details. This is where we go and cover some little details about their age, maybe at the time they died, or how old they are currently, maybe where they're, like, how old they are currently in, like, maybe the media they're found in, their height, their weight, occupation, all sorts of things like this, even personality traits. These sometimes can play a key factor in some of these battles. We have seen this a few times where background details actually carry over so far into the feats that it's a huge factor here. Now, it's not in every single one of these battles where that plays a key factor, but in a few of them they have. Then after that, we get into the feats. Now, this is where we start taking a look at their strengths, their weaknesses, their powers, and we just kind of list things out. We do talk a little bit about some of their capabilities and all this, and I do tend to actually cross this over with data analysis at the same time just because it tends to cross. But after that, speaking on that, we get into the data analysis. This is where we actually break it down mathematically generally. Not always, as I've mentioned in several episodes before. Sometimes it's just, there's almost next to no reason to calculate it out for said battle. As much as I would love to go and calculate everything out, that takes a lot of time, and I unfortunately don't have that much time. So I'm not going to be showing off tons of slides and images and infographics where it's showing all these calculations. Possibly in a couple of these other few of these episodes coming up, we're going to actually have to. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But remember, this is just the first round of each of these. We still have several rounds to go. And this is also, I'll be announcing a big thing about this match here, as I did in a match last season. We're going to be mentioning a similar type of thing about this. This is essentially a match that I've been wanting to see for some time, but I didn't want to do it last season. I wanted to go and get it where it's matched up with a bunch of villains, so we could show this off. But after the data analysis is where we get into the character pros and cons. This is going to kind of be a little bit of a glimpse of like the pros and cons they have, kind of how they cross over against each other. This is not going to be entirely how it breaks down, but this is where you're going to start to see much of the breakdown. After that, if we had guests, this is where we would go over the guest analysis. On top of that, this is also where you guys have a chance to start guessing and let me know what you guys think. Who wins this bout in Comic Wars? And why, even? I mean, I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on this, because at the end of the day, I mean, everybody's thoughts on this could be valid. Especially with some of these battles. It's just like, some of them, they're just so close. It's, bring something up. We can go and talk about it some more. And then, of course, after that, this is where we get into the outcome. This is where we're going to go and analyze different scenarios, like we had to last time. This last episode, we actually had to analyze different scenarios. There were certain scenarios where certain characters just don't hold up. And then there's some scenarios where they completely obliterate their opponent. We got to see that last season, and especially in later rounds, we got to really see those things popping off. But this is going to be an interesting one. I'm going to just tell you that this much. We're going to be doing the math and everything together and kind of talking about what these guys are capable All right, so let's get into our first combatant. That's going to be Freddy Krueger. His real name is Frederick Charles Krueger, and at the time of his death, he was 42 years old. Now, depending on the content you're looking at, you're going to hear some people say, oh, he was like 26 or 28, something like this, and others are going to say that, oh, no, he was actually 42. So it differs, but just for the sake of this, we're going to stick with 42 years old. He is 5'9.5", 5 feet 9.5 inches tall. He weighs 165 pounds. Just make sure to pay very, very close attention to these weights here, because they are going to play a little bit of a factor here, and I'll explain why. And his occupation before his death, well, he was a power plant technician over in Springwood, Ohio. But he was also known as a Springwood slasher. He was, let's just say he is the guy that when people say wood chipper go burr, he would be one of those people that would definitely be looked at and eyed very, very carefully for that. But he was a serial killer. He preyed upon children primarily, but he also killed his wife when she deduced that he was actually the Springwood slasher. As for his personality, now this is where you're going to see some huge differences. These two characters that are duking it out today, they are like polar opposites almost. Freddy Krueger is incredibly cocky, and I do mean incredibly cocky. Probably one of the cockiest characters we've even had on the show so far. And he's also one of those characters, he's up there when it comes to his level of cunning. Now, I want to just make this very clear. Cunning doesn't necessarily mean intelligent. It's definitely a sign of intelligence, extreme sign. But this is the polar opposite of clever. Now, you got clever where it's like, usually they're just, be able to figure things out real quick, maybe put a plan together without a whole lot of deception. Cunning, however, this is where you get into deception, dishonesty, things like this. So this is how this character likes to fight. And on top of that, he's incredibly persistent. He doesn't like to go and just stop going after his opponents, his prey, as he would call it. And he also likes to toy as well. I didn't put that in there because that really kind of goes along with his cockiness and his cunning, but it is kind of separate in a way because he toys. It's like playing with his food, essentially. So he likes to build that fear up, because the more fear that this guy is able to consume, essentially, that he's able to induce upon his opponents, or his prey, as he calls it, the stronger he becomes. Just a little miscellaneous information about this guy. Well, he's a former Dream Master. Now, he was actually toppled by one of his, somebody who he thought was going to be one of his victims. They actually took that title from him and absolutely obliterated him. And he's also a character who's got an incredibly tragic and horrific story as a child, but as I've already mentioned, he's a serial killer. In his adult life, well, it became very horrifying, disturbing, and quite disgusting. Alright, so let's get into some of his feats. And I do apologize for the lag. I do realize it is pretty bad. This is unfortunately my internet and a little bit of my computer being kind of a little messed up right now. I'm not really sure what's going on, but I do apologize. So now we have to look at two different types of feats for Freddy here. We have outside of the dream world, and then we have inside of the dream world. So as far as outside of the dream world, well, he's above average human level of strength. He's able to still, cleanly cut off somebody's head. He's been able to decapitate a few characters just with his claws, just with a swipe. He's also able to impale characters like Jason clean through. I mean, he's a tough cookie, but he's really, you break it down, he's only really just above average human level. And when I say this, I mean he's not above. It's not above like peak human level. No, this is like average. So he's not super strong by any means outside the dream world. As for his durability, well, he wears clothes. He doesn't have any armor or anything. But he has tank to hit from a tank shell. Okay, now this is just from literally a tank, just poof. And You tanked it, no problem. He was damaged, but still tanked it. And he has lost limbs while fighting Jason Voorhees. Keep in mind, Jason is one tough cookie. And he was able to continue fighting pretty much at full pace. So this says a whole lot. He's pretty durable. As for his speed and agility, well, he's incredibly agile. And more often than not, you see him dodging several incoming attacks. And when he's really on the offensive, he even dodges the counterattacks. Does he really need to? Not really, but I mean, he still does. And this includes also with Jason Voorhees. Once again, this is a character who is, when it comes down to his strength and the speed of his attacks, he's monstrous. This is a character whose his attacks are not super slow by any means. Now, it also depends on the movies you watch and the content you're looking at. You look at the comics, he differs in speed, but once again, either way, you're still seeing Freddy dodge these things like they're nothing. But he also uses kind of a bob and weave style. After looking at the movies and all this is really how he does a whole lot of bobbing and weaving. Not quite the same way you'd see coming from a boxer, but somebody that's kind of like, they're just like ducking under things, but they do go back and forth, and he does do this. Not as often as one would assume, and I do put often there because, I mean, you see him for part of the movie, but he doesn't always, sometimes, in fact, he doesn't even dodge it, he just takes it. But when you see him dodge, he often uses kind of a bob and weave type of style. As for his combat capabilities, now this is where things are going to kind of take it down, a little downhill trip for him, because when it comes to his martial prowess, well, he's not a trained fighter. He's got a lot of experience in killing, that's about it. But he ends his fights relatively quick. When he was actually committing his crimes, he wouldn't toy as much. But he does toy now that he's a Dream Demon. So, as for his ingenuity, well, he uses a lot of trickery and, of course, his cunning to cause opponents to panic, which increases his power and potency in combat. Once again, due to the fear. This includes outside of the Dream World. The more fear that he's able to accumulate, the more powerful he becomes. Outside the Dream World, it doesn't affect him as much, but it does affect him still. And we got to see this through a few of his different movies or films that have come out, and in comic books and things like this. We've been able to see this. This does actually occur. His most prominent time where we get to see this is actually in Freddy versus Jason. That's where you get to see this, the most potency coming from there, because he actually does, due to the fear increasing, he's actually able to start affecting the real world a bit. Not as much as one would assume and all this, but he's also able to, when people are in like a calm, relaxed state, I'm not going to get into the reasons why they're in a calm, relaxed state, he's actually able to affect them. So, but he also has a very slow regeneration outside of the Dream World. On top of that, now we're going to get into his powers here. So powers outside the Dream World, well, this includes fire manipulation. Once again, all of his powers are derived completely from him having his Dream Demons with him. Now, he himself is a Dream Demon, but he also has Dream Demons that give him power. So as long as he has them with him, he has got immense amounts of power. Keep in mind, these are demons. I just want to make that very clear. But this includes fire manipulation, telekinesis, and regeneration. Once again, in reality, it's very slow. Or outside the Dream World, it's very, very slow. But he can use telekinesis, and he does have some minor fire manipulation. Next up, now we're going to get into his dream powers. So in the Dream World, well, his strength, durability, and speed and agility, well, he can just adjust them at will. And especially with the more fear he's accumulated, the more potent this becomes. This actually becomes incredibly potent. In some cases, I mean, he becomes something that you just can't stop, almost. But on top of his speed and agility, we have to mention this, and this is going to be mentioned as powers as well. He's capable of teleporting. And does this character run? Absolutely. He runs, he's, like I said, he toys, so he does all sorts of different types of movements, but he'll like speed walk or run. As for combat capabilities, once again, not a trained fighter. and he uses the same kinds of trickery, but he can do some, like, he can manipulate realities. So I mean, he can shapeshift. He's turned into a giant worm, a caterpillar. He's turned into all sorts of different animals and monsters and all this. So he's actually able to use this even greater. So if somebody's actually able to fight him in the dream world, well, this is where he's going to become incredibly potent. But once again, his power is relative to the amount of fear he's accumulating. As for his regeneration, well, it's pretty much just instantaneous. He can recover. Once again, something that it's adjustable at will. Okay. So now this is where we get into the powers. He's got quite the list here. So he's got age manipulation. We got to see this when he manipulated Jason. He was able to turn him back into a child, a very small child, before he was drowned. Was able to do this. Now, there's a lot of reasons as to why, and it could be assumed that it was just Jason's fear, and because he was in Jason's mind, dragging him in like that, manipulating his fear, it reverted him back to a childlike state. In the dream world, that would just show him as a child, though, right? So that's debatable whether he can actually truly do that, but he can manipulate anything in the dream world. He can create animals. He can do all sorts of things. He can manipulate them entirely. He has complete control over the dream world. Once again, depends on how much fear he's accumulated. He can still manipulate the crap out of it, but once again, its potency isn't quite as good if he doesn't have any fear coming in. He can also duplicate himself as many times as he wants. He's got an elasticity ability, so he can literally stretch his arms. This does come into some of his techniques he likes to use. Now, this is where we have to go and break into the kind of the non-canon type of things, such as Mortal Kombat. Now, I bring this up for a reason. With his elasticity, he can manipulate things with his reality warping. He can do anything he wanted directly from the Mortal Kombat game if he wanted to. Where he was actually a character who was playable. He can do any of those things. Any one of those things. He can do any single one. I just wanted to go and just reiterate that then, okay? Because this is where things get a little interesting here. Because this is where his cunning comes in. Now, is he really being deceptive? No, he's in the dream world. He just manipulates it. So it is kind of a clever-based thing, but it's cunning still. Because some of these attacks aren't always what they seem to be. He's also, once again, empowerment from fear. The more fear he accumulates, the more powerful he becomes. He's also got instantaneous regeneration. Once again, comes back from the fear potency. Intangibility, so literally things can go right through him if he wants them to. He can remain completely invisible. Memory manipulation, he can literally manipulate others' memories while they're in the dream world. Now, this doesn't necessarily matter too much on the fear potency. He can affect this pretty regularly. Doesn't even have to really have a huge amount of fear going on. He can screw with somebody's mind real easy. He can also possess people that are also in or outside of the dream world. So once again, being a demon, he can do this. Once again, reality warping, I already mentioned that. He can control the size of himself or others, or even just where they're located at. Like he could transform that reality. He could make it so they look like they're shrinking, but really he just increased the size of the environment. He's also got soul absorption, so he can actually absorb souls. And being a demon, this is actually something he's quite good at anymore, but he's able to also manipulate souls. And this does include, he can, technically speaking, if he really wanted to, he should hypothetically be able to rip out someone's soul while they're in the dream world. Hypothetically, we don't have any proof of this, but this could be something that could be possible. He also controls, he's got spatial manipulation, technology manipulation. He's literally been able to, he can do things like place calls from the dream world into reality to scare people. He's done all sorts of this kind of stuff, but he's able to do quite a bit. He doesn't actually have to be in or outside the dream world to be able to interact with somebody. He can also, once again, teleport. He's got time manipulation. This is in the dream world. He can't really manipulate time. To some extent, he kind of can, but once again, this comes down to the fear that he's accumulated. He's also got the ability of immersion, so he can actually pull people into objects from outside of the dream world. This includes even with the more fear he's got over somebody or groups of people, he can actually draw them into the dream world to some extent, or even attack them from inside the dream world. While he's still got the powers of being in the dream world. It's really, really bizarre, but it's interesting. He's also got telepathy, so yeah, he can read your mind. Self-sustenance. He doesn't need to eat, drink, or anything like this. He's already dead. Technically, he's undead to some extent, but he's a demon. Doesn't need to actually consume anything. His dream demons will actually instantly revive him if they choose to. They can completely resurrect him. He could be literally wood chipper go burr, and all of a sudden, boom, he's just completely good. Again, that level of resurrection is ridiculous. But now this is where we get into the fun part, his weaknesses. Holy relics, things like crosses, holy water, yeah, they all hurt him. His reflection, that's the weird one, and I've only seen a little bit of this. I don't remember exactly which movie it was or which comic it was, but I did actually witness this. Yes, is where it's not necessarily his weakness. It doesn't damage him per se, but he doesn't like what he sees. Essentially, is what it kind of looked like, more or less. So that's why I didn't embolden that, because it's like it's not really a weakness, but it is something that affects him. It's bizarre. He can also be pulled out from the dream world. And if somebody does that, yes, now he loses all of his dream world powers. But there's some powers he still got because the dream demons. Fire itself is one of his weaknesses, and yes, it's weird because he can also control fire. It's a little bizarre. All those powers he also has outside the dream world. He also has. I forgot to include those, but that being said, he's also susceptible to death if his dream demons leave him, which they have. Now this is more of a comic thing because of the Necronomicon. He lost that. And because he lost the Necronomicon, they basically said, nope, we're done with you. So, but for this case, we're not using the Necronomicon because it becomes a little more ridiculous. Like, we're talking Cthulhu level type of destruction, which you start bringing eldritch, deities and things like this. This is where things get a little funky. Even the likes of things that can reality warp and change shape and all this, and they don't really stack up. This is like far beyond that. So, and that's the level of power he gets if he has that. So it's not fair to bring that in, nor am I going to ever do that because it's not right. But let's get into his opponent, Pinhead, who was created by Clive Barker. I also forgot to mention Wes Craven created Freddy Krueger, so I do apologize for that, Wes Craven. Rest in peace. But it is one of those things that I do need to mention. But his real name is Elliot Spencer, and he's over 100 years old. As this year, he's like 100 and I think he's like 120, 130, something like this. He's born in 1887, if I'm not mistaken. So he's a bit over 100. Yeah, let's see, 120 and like 130 about ish. Or 140, sorry. Just about. He is 6'5" tall. He's massive. Now this is where the weight comes in. He's only 194 pounds. You weigh that up against Freddy. Freddy's got a bit more to him. He's a bit bulkier than Pinhead over here, who's only 194 pounds at 6'5" tall. That makes him anorexic. I mean, I'm about 6'5"-ish, just like 6'4.5" or so, and 225 is what they want me at. That's skinny. That's really, really skinny. So that should tell you something. He's under that, and he's my height, so we're talking pretty dang skinny. So once again, this does play a little bit of a factor here. As for his occupation, well, he's a former captain of the British Expeditionary Force. Now, this is back in World War I. But currently, he is a Hell Priest. The Hell Priest, to be specific. As for his area of operation, he is one of the first characters I can actually say he can operate anywhere. It's really whoever summons him, or if he just, I just want to go to this place, he goes. So, he doesn't just stick to one area. There's not one city, not one state, not one country he sticks to. He goes all over the world. and even into outer space. Just throwing that out there. As for his personality, he's highly intelligent, he's deceptive, and he's incredibly persistent. This guy does not stop hunting his prey. Whoever solves the limit configuration summons the Cenobites, and the Hell Priest is the leader of that, so he comes along with it, and you don't want him coming after you. But I've already mentioned his miscellaneous information. He's the leader of the Cenobites. Now let's get into his feats here. So this is just going to be straightforward. No matter where he's at, he's got all these. Strength, superhuman level. You never really see him use his actual physical strength. He doesn't need to. You'll see why in a second. As for his durability, well, he's got a leather robe on. But he's got an extremely high pain tolerance. I mean, it's ridiculous. It took one of his greatest foes, Kirsty Cotton, who actually started, she swapped places with him as a Hell Priest. And what they did to each other, they were literally, it's a little torturous. I'm not going to go into the gritty details, but essentially, he was no longer Pinhead. I'll put it that way. And so that's how they swapped places. But he was also able to tank hits from the Cenobite, the Doctor. Now, if I'm not mistaken, it's been a while since I've seen the movie. Even for research purposes like this, it's been a bit. So I think the last time I watched it was about 2 weeks ago. And I was just watching things from the fight itself. When it comes down to this, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the Doctor was actually able to kill him to some extent. But he was able to come back and help stop the Doctor, if I'm not mistaken. Like I said, it's been a couple weeks since I've seen it, and it's still a little foggy. But yeah, he was able to tank hits, and he was a newly formed Cenobite that Pinhead was not part of. And this guy had immense strength. If I'm not mistaken, it was like direct strength from the Leviathan, like completely, which is the guy who gave Pinhead his powers. As for his speed and agility, well, he chooses to walk and teleport exclusively. He doesn't need to move fast. He can send his chains after you. He can just teleport right near you, things like this. But he likes to go and mess with you a bit. He speaks to you. That's his big thing here. But he's agile enough to catch 3 bullets fired at him. If you watch it, it's debatable if he caught him with his teeth or if he just caught him inside of his mouth. And they just kind of just didn't go anywhere. I would assume he caught them with his teeth and just kind of spit him into his mouth a little bit, kind of just let him go in. But he was able to do this at somebody firing from a revolver at him, or a pistol. And just caught them all 3 in his mouth. As for his combat capabilities, well, he's got basic training with World War I era firearms and sabers. Those are going to be his specialty, but really it's not his specialty either because he's got basic training. But his ingenuity, now this is where things take a little bit of a funny turn here. Well, he typically uses supernatural chains that he controls telekinetically to shred and torture opponents. And he also manipulates opponents with fear and threats of pain. This also includes, he also will do the same thing through the Lament configuration, which is how he's summoned and how he's also able to be banished. Just throwing that out there as a weakness. It is his only weakness, really. But he'll also promise things like pleasure, all this. So, wealth, and things like this, wealth and fame. He promises all these things because he wants people to be summoned, because he's just trying to draw people in to either be tortured or to become a new Cenobite under his control. So he's quite the manipulator. Once again, I do apologize for the lag. As for his powers, well, he's got his supernatural chains. They're capable of easily lifting cars. Now, these chains can also change shape, just based on if he wants them to change shape. He's got the gift of teleportation. He's got regenerative powers as well, reality warping, minor invulnerability, so some things just won't damage him, but there's other things that will. If it's a heavy enough attack, For instance, if somebody has superhuman strength, or they've got like a special type of weapon, like holy weapons, things like that. I mean, they can damage him still. I mean, he's been, if I'm not mistaken, I believe he's been stabbed by knives and all this. So it's got to be a really, it's not like a super heavy attack, but it's got to be a heavy enough attack that it can, not just swipe it at him. It's not generally going to do anything to him. But he's also able to manipulate explosions. This is the first character I've ever seen be able to manipulate an explosion. It's ridiculous. He also can manipulate ice, and he, just to basically show this, he was able to turn water into ice. You could debate if that was just temperature manipulation or not, but he can also form things out of it and all that. But he's also got fire manipulation. This could come in handy. Energy manipulation, so any kind of energy, he can just manipulate it. You got electricity, bam, he can manipulate the crap out of that. You got light, he can bend it. You've got something like this, he can manipulate it. I've already mentioned temperature manipulation technically, but he's actually able to melt a cross. That should tell you something. So he's like, oh, okay, this could affect me. Well, I'm going to melt it. It doesn't affect me anymore. It's no longer a holy relic. Unless, once again, we don't know the extent of if that takes away a blessing or not. We don't know. Soul manipulation, yes, he can straight up rip people's souls out and things like that. So, and he's got the ability for necromancy. Now, when I say necromancy, we're talking some minor necromancy. He can literally just turn the undead into Cenobites at will. He can also summon his Cenobites to his side, or around an opponent, or whatever he wants to do with them. He can summon them. He can also summon/create portals. He can go and do dimensional travel on his own without the lament configuration. He can astral project, so he can literally, his soul can leave his body, and he can go and travel somewhere, and remote view and all this. It's intense what he can do. He can also memory absorb. You've got memories, he can just take them. He wants them, he'll take them. He can remove them from you, whatever he wants to do. He's also got the ability of telekinesis. Once again, I've already explained that through his chains. Telepathy, so he can read your mind. Now, this is the fun part. Both characters are telepathic. So, if both players are both characters are telepathic, what happens then? Do they cancel each other out? Well, you could debate. Now, this is where it kind of becomes kind of one of those things where it's like they'd be having a conversation, essentially. I'm reading your mind, you're reading mine. I can see exactly what you're going to go and be planning. They're going to cancel a lot of their things out against each other, so. But he's also technically an immortal. And when I say that, he can die, but he doesn't like age doesn't affect him. Diseases don't really affect him. In fact, one of his next ones is age. He's immune to age manipulation diseases, so he doesn't age and diseases don't affect him. But he can die if it's like, high enough level of explosives and things like this. If they hit him directly, they can kill him. He can die. So he's not invincible. But he's also incorporeal, which means incorporeal, which means he is actually based on his form is energy. So if you were able to destroy his energy, which once again you got to look at certain scientific principles about energy, but I mean really you can manipulate him so he can still be ripped apart and things like this. You can still do away with him, but can he come back together? Pretty easily, yes. He's immune to age manipulation diseases. He has got an ability of size manipulation. He's actually be able to become bigger than the planet Earth. And he's got body manipulation. He can create hooks from the nails in his body. And just literally he can just transform his body at will. And as I've already mentioned, his weakness is he can be banished to hell if the lament configuration is reconfigured. Now, certain configurations will do certain things. They're able to, like for instance, if they're able to form the configuration of the Leviathan, which is essentially his master, the guy who gave him all of his powers and all this, then he's banished to hell. So, there's that. So let's get into the data analysis. When we're looking at these characters here, what we're looking at here is characters that they are ridiculous. It's like good luck on trying to beat these guys. That being said, they're both like this. Now, these guys are both very tricky characters too, so there's going to be a lot of mind games and a lot of things going on. Now, how this works, no matter what, this is how the battles would have to begin, because Freddy he would, no matter what, begin in the dream world. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. He would be in the dream world. So he would have to be wanting the lament configuration, looking for more power, just like how he found the Necronomicon and all this, how he was able to go and find these things, or just like how he found his daughter. You know, it's the same way. He's going to be in the dream world, and he can't really do anything until, you know, he's got to affect the reality in a certain way. He's got to build up fear, do all sorts of things. But if he were able to go and get the lament configuration, or if Pinhead just decided he wanted just to teleport into, travel into the dream world dimension, if you will. You could debate its dimension or not, but that's how this would go no matter what. It's gonna start off in the dream world. So no matter what, Freddy's gonna be at a debatable advantage. Once again, his powers are reliant on fear. Pinhead doesn't feel fear, so this gives a little bit of a disadvantage. At least he's not shown to be feeling fear. So when we're looking at this, you got to look at like the strength feats, because Freddy's got two different forms essentially. You have outside the dream world and inside the dream world. Outside the dream world, Freddy's just like an average guy. He's just a normal guy he's agile. With he takes damage, but he can still fight after receiving a ton of damage too. So this is where we start looking at things, and honestly, it's going to come down to the powers. End of the day. Doesn't make a difference on everything else a whole lot. But powers are going to be your biggest thing here. So when it comes to strength, I mean, you're looking at Freddy's above average. You know, above the average Joe. But then at the same time, he's also at basically the power of infinite. He can have his strength at whatever level he wants, his durability at whatever he wants. His speed and agility. He can have these things at pretty much whatever limit he wants. So, that being said, outside of his dream world, Freddy's going to be a bit of a pushover in this case. As for durability and things like this, I mean, we're looking at, you got a character, they're both just wearing essentially clothes. One's got a high pain tolerance and minor invulnerability, while the other one can be affected by things still, and he's wearing clothing. And then you got speed. Both have got the ability to teleport. When we're looking at, you know, like evasiveness, Freddy's fast, but when you're looking at Pinhead, well, he catches bullets with his mouth and then spits them back out. Good luck on trying to fire on him. But that's where a lot of these things they're gonna fall into. The data analysis here is just gonna basically be, let's look at the powers, because in the dream world they're essentially the same, and this battle more than likely would just basically sit in the dream world. You've got a guy with instantaneous regeneration, but you've also got leader of the Cenobites. And what are Cenobites? They're demons. They're a different type of demon, but they are a demon. End of the day, they're still demons. So I'm just gonna say screw it. We're just gonna go and skip the data analysis. We just really got to look at what can they do. You know, where are their strengths gonna be? So when I said we're gonna look at the background here, Freddy's weight, he's gonna be a little bit bulkier. Is that gonna really matter when they both got, you know, when one's got literally superhuman strength and the other one doesn't? Not really. But we have to look at it. So who wins this when it comes to reach? Well, Pinhead gets the reach if he was to physically strike him, but he's also going to have the advantage on range because he's got his chains. Now, anything inside the dream world is how this would begin. Anything in the dream world, well, Pinhead's going to still be able to be manipulated. Now, who's going to have a stronger manipulation at this point? This is going to be debatable, but it's in Freddy's realm, so we're going to assume it would have to go to Freddy. So, but end of the day, what do you got here? You got height and weight. Are they going to play anything here? They're not going to be in Freddy's favor. His weight might be, but once again, it's not going to matter because Pinhead's got superhuman strength. So that doesn't matter. Is the personality going to matter? No, not really. You got one that's going to try and manipulate. They both got telepathy. They're both going to see exactly what they're thinking. So that's going to be kind of a stalemate. So we're not even going to be using background at all. I just wanted to make that very clear. We don't need to, and I just wanted to explain that exactly why that will not occur. As for strength, this is where we're gonna be splitting this here. Outside the dream world, Freddy is completely outclassed, and we're gonna give him a double negative, with Pinhead getting a double positive. However, inside the dream world, Freddy will take the lead. It's not by much. Well, you could debate he could completely outclass him. We're only going to give him 1 point on this, 1 positive and then 1 negative for Pinhead. The reason being is because we don't actually know the full extent of Freddy's power, especially when there's no fear. He's not going to be able to manipulate Pinhead by fear, at least as far as we know. So, once again, this is something that's never been explained. As for durability, all of these, durability and speed and agility, are all going to be, it's either going to be in Dream World or not. We look or outside the Dream World, Freddy, well, his durability is nowhere near as high as Pinhead's. So, once again, he will be completely outclassed in the Dream World, or outside the Dream World. Inside the Dream World, this is where we're going to go and get durability for Freddy. It's going to be close. I would give the edge to Freddy, and the reason being because he can adjust it at will. We don't know the extent of the fear, if he can actually inflict fear upon Pinhead or not. Allegedly, he's not able to really feel anything like that as a Hell Priest. So one could assume Freddy's never going to have a boost on that, but we also don't know the extent of if Freddy actually has power or not over Pinhead in that case, like durability-wise, if he's going to be able to increase himself to be like ridiculous. So we're just going to go and assume that he'll be able to, but it's not going to be a complete outclassing. And this is because you have to look at size manipulation and the fact that Pinhead is also, well, incorporeal. So can he be manipulated? Yes, he could. As for speed and agility, outside, Freddy gets outclassed. This is actually where I would say that Pinhead we've actually got a feat where we can see this. When it comes to evasiveness, well, Pinhead's not going to evade. Could he though? Yes, they both can teleport, so technically speaking, and with telepathy and all this, they're going to be at a stalemate. I would say that this is going to be a draw. This is a weird one, like I said. Martial prowess, who's a better fighter? This is where we're actually going to have to... It's not going to be much better, and this would go to Pinhead. Not by much. As for ingenuity, now this is where I want to break this down. So we're going to go into ingenuity. Freddy uses trickery and cunning. Okay, and he also... he needs his regeneration. Okay, so that's where he's going to kind of stick around. He's going to go between regenerating. He needs to go and do his regeneration if he gets hit. And he's going to keep fighting even when he is severely damaged. But then you've also got Pinhead, where he's going to be able to tank quite a bit. But you look at Freddy in the Dream World, same thing. He relies on the same tactics. However, he's going to be relying a lot more on the reality warping, the spatial spatial manipulation, things like this. He's going to rely on a lot of this stuff, which quite a bit of it will still affect Pinhead. But then you look at Pinhead. What is his ingenuity? Well, he typically uses chains that he controls telekinetically to shred and torture opponents, and then he manipulates opponents with fear and threats of pain. Freddy can feel fear. In the Dream World, he's not going to, though. He can if somebody proves to be a greater foe than him, or basically somebody who's a little more powerful. he's comparable. So Freddy could technically feel fear at this point. This is where I'm actually going to give the edge right here to Pinhead. It's not by much. Now we get into powers. Now neither one of these guys is going to be able to really outmaneuver the other one, but we have to, once again, this is going to go inside and outside the dream world. And actually, I'm actually going to put this on ingenuity one more time. He's completely outclassed outside. So outside the dream world, well, Pinhead's got this in the bag, no problem. Inside the dream world, it's a different story. Things are going to be a little more difficult for Pinhead here. But we look at the powers here. And we're not even going to look at outside because that doesn't matter. He gets it completely outclassed. Or Freddy does. But inside the dream world, that's where things take a little bit of a weird turn. You got age manipulation. Well, that doesn't affect Pinhead. Animal manipulation. Well, that could confuse Pinhead potentially. You've also got the fact that Pinhead's got some abilities that kind of counter some of these. However, he cannot manipulate the dream world. Okay? Now, this is where things are a little bit different. Is the dream world reality? No. It's outside of reality. So he's not going to be able to manipulate that. Freddy's also going to be able to duplicate himself. He's going to have his elasticity. He's strong enough in the dream world, he could actually hurt or kill Pinhead. He's also got instantaneous regeneration. He can make himself intangible, so he can literally avoid all attacks through intangibility. This is where we're getting into the really good part here. Is he's got some huge advantages. He could literally just avoid damage from Pinhead entirely. He can also manipulate his memory. Both these characters can manipulate memory. With telepathy, they cancel each other out, essentially. Freddy's not going to be able to possess him. He wouldn't have that capability because, well, he's already... Demons don't possess demons. It's just general rule, they don't. Can they? I believe it's plausible, possibly, but not... You don't generally see that. In fact, most lore would suggest other than that. He can reality warp, size manipulation, so anything that... basically they're going to go and have the same feats and all of these things. Soul absorption, soul manipulation, they both got that. Spatial manipulation, that's strictly to Freddy. Technology manipulation, that's not going to really matter. Teleportation, they can well do that. Time manipulation doesn't really matter. Immersion, so pulling people into objects and outside of the dream world. Now this is an interesting one because he can just pull them into an object, then he could destroy the object. That's where things get interesting. So this is literally, he could one-shot. If he did this correctly, if he were able to deceive somehow, or is able to catch Pinhead off guard, he could literally pull him into, let's say, a piece of paper and then burn it. And what would happen? Well, he would die. But he's also pure energy, so he could technically pull himself back together, but for a comic war battle like this, that would be a loss, regardless. They're going to cancel each other out with telepathy. Self-sustenance, I mean, it's not going to really matter on this one. Resurrection, immortality. This is where things get a little different because his is a direct. They will just bring him back instantly if they're there. They choose to do it, they'll do it. So this would be a scenario in itself. There's the scenarios where they will do it, and then there's scenarios where they won't. As for his weaknesses, well, you look at the weaknesses here. Freddy's actually got weaknesses. Could Pinhead pull him from reality? Yes, he could. Quite easily. He can just create a portal and just get him right out. He can yank him through the portal and all of a sudden his powers are gone. Which means he's susceptible to death at that point. The Dream Demons can still revive him, but at that point they're going to be viewing this as like, oh, well, this is a greater demon, why aren't we just working with him? So this could manipulate him real easily. But he also, his weakness is also fire. He died by fire. That's one of his biggest weaknesses. He also tends to manipulate it too against his opponents, so he's a little bit of a weirdo with that. But so let's look at Pinhead. Let's look at his feats once again. So you look at one. You look at his powers here. Whoops. Wrong one. There we go. He's got the supernatural chains. which are capable of easily lifting cars, teleportation, regeneration. It's a form of regeneration, not a whole lot. You do see him regenerate, but not really. A lot of it happens off screen. Once again, I know I'm saying that a lot, but this does come down to there's specific limits to some of this. Reality warping, he's got the same power, so they're going to cancel each other out. Minor invulnerability. This is where he's got a little more of the durability than him, but it's in some cases, and even then, Freddy's still going to be able to penetrate in the dream world. So, explosion, ice and fire manipulation, energy manipulation, temperature manipulation. It's not really going to matter. They're going to cancel each other out because Freddy can do the same things. Well, with fire and temperature, technically. Soul manipulation, they're going to cancel each other out. Necromancy, are the Cenobites going to matter here? You could debate, but Freddy can also just duplicate himself, so they're going to cancel each other out there, essentially. But Freddy can just keep doing it. And there's not going to be any dead bodies there for him to manipulate, so therefore no creating other additional Cenobites. And his biggest strength against Freddy in this case, in the dream world, is going to be getting that portal summoned and then pulling him through. It's the only way he's really going to be able to do that successfully. Because, well, Pinhead's not asleep. So not only would Freddy summon him, or Pinhead could just come there and fight him. It's either way. If there's a lament configuration, well, Freddy could also just hold him off and then just figure it out. Oh, what's this do? Okay. So he could easily take him out too. So this is where things get a little interesting here. Astral projection's not going to matter here because what Freddy could do, that's his soul. He could just destroy his soul. So astral projecting would actually be a huge weakness here. Memory absorption, not going to matter. They're going to cancel each other out. They'd literally have to catch each other off guard for that to be possible, but telepathy, so it's not going to matter. Telekinesis, they both got that. It's not going to matter. Telepathy, not going to matter. Going to cancel each other out. Immortality, they're both immortal in the dream world. Not going to matter. Well, he's immortal no matter what. Incorporeal, he's basically just an energy form. Once again, that can be manipulated in the dream world. Immune to age manipulation diseases, not really going to be playing a key factor here. Size manipulation, they can both do that. Body manipulation, it's not going to really matter because so can Freddy. He can manipulate anything. He can actually manipulate his body if he wanted to. So this really, when it comes to powers, Freddy and Pinhead cancel quite a few of their own powers out, but end of the day, Freddy's got more, and they're more dangerous. This easily goes to Freddy in the dream world on that. So let's analyze this. If you were to look at just the points alone, Freddy loses handedly outside the dream world. So this goes Pinhead. But if you look inside the dream world, you've got, let's see, 1, 2, draw, 4 points, and Pinhead has got 1, 2 points. So Freddy wins inside the dream world. But now we have to look at the scenarios here. What's more likely? Is Pinhead going to be able to pull him from reality? Or into reality, outside the dream world? Or is Freddy going to be able to just dupe him? Well, he can go intangible. So him using his chains is not going to work to yank him out. It's going to be, you're going to have very, very few scenarios where that actually occurs. And even if that were to happen, the minute Freddy sees there's a portal and that's going to go and take him out there, he can see that, or he starts seeing these shenanigans, he is a bit of one of those guys that he'll get a little fearful. He's going to want to go and try and manipulate the situation as much as possible. He's going to start blocking that off. He's going to start doing all sorts of things to screw with Pinhead. End of the day, Pinhead's not going to really get those chances very often. Pinhead's strong. Inside the dream world, this is where it would start. If it was starting in the outside, like outside the dream world, Pinhead would have this handedly, not even trying. But this is not how it would start, because where is Freddy stuck at initially? He's in the dream world. So this has to start in the dream world. Freddy's not going to be able to go to hell like that. He's in the dream world. He's not going to leave it. There's no way of turns buts. But those are the scenarios that it would go to Pinhead. If he were to go to hell, it's not the dream world. Freddy's going to be pretty much powerless there. If he starts in reality, he loses. He's powerless there. He's not going to be able to knock him out or anything. So, and even then, that's like I said, where Freddy's going to begin. No matter what, it would be in the dream world. So, all these scenarios are in the dream world, and Pinhead's literally got only like one opening out of like thousands others where Freddy's going to have an advantage. End of the day, it doesn't matter about Pinhead having control outside of reality. He's not going to be able to get him outside of reality. It's going to be very, very few scenarios where he's going to be able to. Like I said, you'd be looking at about a 1 in 1,000 chance that he'd be able to, roughly. So, but that is tonight's Comic Wars battle, and with Freddy as our winner, my big announcement before we